I'm Vance Bastian, here alone today to bring you this week's Written on the Edge Season 11, Episode 25 interview. I'm joined by Natalie Simone to discuss their queer art, what drives their creation, and how you can add their art to your next event or project. So let's get to know my guest. Natalie Simone, nicknamed Noot, is a non binary, queer, and disabled mixed media artist. Their art explores feminism, gender, sexuality, sense of self, relationships, mental health, and other various avenues of self expression drawn from the human experience. Natalie is often inspired by music, movies, and other forms of media, and I've got questions about that. So they create a lot of fan art as well. They have an online store under the shop name Nootcreations and do local art markets when they are physically able to. They grew up in Massachusetts and graduated from Syracuse University with a BFA degree in studio arts, as well as a minor in LGBT plus studies. Natalie, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so
Our
glad to be
pleasure. I'm
here.
glad we connected too.
Me too. I'm so glad. I had never really considered coming on a podcast before, but I love listening to podcasts. And so it only makes sense.
You're a create. Well, one, we want to house all queer artists here under our big umbrella and archive your art forever so that people can always find it, but so that the world doesn't forget about us. Two, yes, queer art. Love it.
Yeah.
So that is the perfect thing to talk about on a podcast. I know we're going to release this on YouTube so people will see us flash up a little bit, but even the idea behind your art, like what drove you to be an artist? Where was that first spark of inspiration? Do you even remember?
I honestly don't remember. Because I've just sort of been drawing as long as I can remember. It was
Mm-hmm.
something I always liked doing. I can say my mom, who actually was a guest on the podcast, which is how we connected, SM
Mm-hmm.
Stevens, she has stories about the first time that she noticed like an artistic spark in me as a child, because to me, it just felt normal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like we have these framed photos of like paintings of flowers I did. And for the longest time that I did them when I was like 4, for the longest time I asked my mom, why do we even have these? They are look like nothing. They're like finger paintings. Why do we still have these framed in our house after like 20 years? And she said apparently the teacher framed them for us and
Oh.
gave them to us because she was like, the fact that a 4-year-old can conceptualize like painting flowers in this way and it's not just like smudges, she was like, that's not a normal painting for a 4-year-old. And I didn't know that. So like it's more other people noticed that I was like really had an artistic eye before I did because I thought that's just how everyone saw the world.
One, we love on this show stories of teachers that have like sparked our futures. Speaking as a substitute teacher, I know what it means when a student looks at you and realizes that you've seen them. So
Yeah.
so even though you may not have clocked it at the time when you were 4 years old, what an amazing experience because this guided you.
Yeah. And I actually considered transferring schools in high school because we had such a small, underfunded art department, and I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
But I did have an incredible art teacher. She's retired now, but I stayed in touch with her and made some art for her and stuff for her retirement. And because she really she knew that art was what I wanted to do, so she did her best to guide me. She told me about like building a portfolio and like things that are good for art school and stuff like that. So like she really went above and beyond, even though the art program itself and our materials and classes were so limited. So yeah, teachers definitely can shape your life even when they don't have a lot of resources. They can be the resource.
Well, exactly. And so
Yeah.
following that narrative, you did go to school for art.
I did. So I stayed in sort of the studio arts umbrella, but my concentration was in painting and illustration. Um, in all honesty, I don't paint as much as I used to, but that's partly because of my physical condition declining and just how demanding painting is. So I do a lot more digital art now because it's more accessible for me.
Hmm.
But I do love painting and I liked illustration because I liked storytelling and like how much you visually communicate with illustration.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So while you were studying art as your major, you also dipped into LGBT plus studies.
Yes, and that was a really big part of why I went to Syracuse University. Since I'm from Massachusetts, it's a very common thing for you to go to Mass Art. I actually took some classes at Mass Art when I was in high school
Uh-huh.
because they have like high school programs that you can do on the weekends. And Mass Art is a really cool school, but because they focus in art, they don't have much available outside of that.
Right.
And in my sort of last 2 years of high school, I had really come to terms with my identity as a queer person and started getting involved in, or not necessarily getting involved in, but started getting interested in activism and queer history. And
Mm-hmm.
some of the first queer people, like queer historical figures I was introduced to were artists. I always say I was in middle school when I learned about Keith Haring,
Yeah.
and that really stuck with me. And then in high school, I learned about Frida Kahlo, who, as since she is
Yes.
queer and also
Yes.
disabled, she became a very big inspiration for me. Um, so, like some of the first queer figures in history I ever knew about were taught to me through art. So, but yeah, so I really wanted to stay involved in that. And I knew I could do something in women's and gender studies, as the programs are called, but there are a couple places, including Syracuse University, where they do specifically have a program that's more focused on queerness. And the classes themselves were queer sexuality, sort of was
Okay.
the title for them, but the minor is titled LGBT plus studies. So we kind of people throw the different terms around, but I really wanted to learn more about the history and think about queer theory. And so I always say I graduated with like the bare minimum amount of credits because there's no crossover at all between
No.
my there was only one other person in the program that had a minor that was outside of art because it's so hard to get credits for both, especially since art is so time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
As a major, like you can't, it's a project, it's not a paper, so you can't really like just do it last minute.
Mm-hmm.
So, so yeah, so I really wanted to make sure that I could foster both of those aspects of myself in my growth.
Right. Well, and you said that at the university level there was no crossover. In your heart and mind there was.
Absolutely.
When did you first start to say, "Hey, I can take from this and I can take from this and I can make something?"
I honestly, part of it was people like Frida Kahlo and Keith Haring. I loved that Keith Haring had a lot of activism in
Mm-hmm.
his work, especially towards like HIV and AIDS awareness.
Yes.
Um, but Frida Kahlo was a lot more introspective, which was a lot more what drew me to art. I love writers and I love reading writing, but I've always struggled with putting how I feel into words.
Oh.
And I think that's why I like writers so much. I admire when other people can. But so I was always very introspective, and imagery felt more accurate to describe the feelings I was having than words. And so seeing how Frida Kahlo I also love surrealism because of that, because of all the interesting images that you can pull in metaphorically, symbolically. And so her paintings really made me understand how you can bring something that's within yourself and um, sort of try and explain that and express that to other people visually. I did also, I will say, once I got to college more, I got very inspired by drag artists. And that's when I sort of started getting involved in like seeing drag artists perform. Especially since then I was 18, so I could go to gay
You could
bars and
go.
gay
Yep.
clubs. Yeah. But I was also part of an organization for like a queer student union on campus that would then like host drag shows and drag
Oh, neat.
competitions and stuff. Yeah. And so drag is such a visual thing, and I've always loved performance. And I've always loved makeup. And so like seeing how they meld all of that together, it's like the action of performing, the visual of the clothes and the hair and the makeup, the music and audio that they decide to use, and the live performance, like interaction with the people there, all of that was so inspiring for me. And I think that really pushed me creatively to move more towards like exaggeration and rather than feeling like I need to stay so sort of like serious as well.
Right. Well, and that's exactly it. I mean, if you look at a drag queen who's ready to perform, the moment before they open their mouths, you can already see the story in how they've presented themselves. There is a there is a visible story there. And so
Yeah.
you're saying that, you've adapted that level of extravaganza into your art.
Yes, I really like, I've always been a little bit of an extreme person. I'm not very subdued or
Never
and
hide your light.
yeah. And I never had any shyness to the point that sometimes people treated it as almost like a party trick of like Natalie will go up and talk to anyone. Like, as so, like my parents would be at a restaurant and be like, Natalie, go talk to that girl. And I'd be like, okay. And stuff like that. So, like, I've always been very out there. And so, and I've always felt things very strongly and extremely. I don't, so, the exaggeration and like boldness of like how drag artists present themselves and how sometimes it's to match the internal feelings, sometimes it's to take something small and make it big, you
Yes.
know?
Yep.
Um, so I really, yeah, I really was drawn in by how intense and exaggerated everything can be. And I think I really leaned into camp and how, like, because I always liked things that weren't following the rules.
Hmm.
And so the way that camp is like, it doesn't have to be highbrow, it doesn't have to be sophisticated to be considered good. It's
Hmm.
like you just have to enjoy it. It has to feel right to you. It can be as unserious and ironic and weird and silly as you want it to be. And so I think that really made me push my art from not taking myself so seriously and taking more chances with it and being like, well, it might be weird to put sparkles here, but also that's sort of what feels right to me. So I'll do it.
Nice. So introspection, beauty, self, activism out there in your face, and extravaganza. I take it the theme of your art, or at least the theme you're pushing for, is challenge.
I've never really thought of it that way, but I think as a creator, you should always try and challenge yourself. I think
Hmm.
you can get stuck being comfortable. And so, so yeah, I think I am always trying to challenge myself so that I don't stay stagnant. And I also, I mean, what creator is totally satisfied with their work? Pretty much
Never.
no one.
Never.
Sometimes people ask if I'll put my art up around our house, and always say no, because then I will stare at it until I hate it.
Oh.
So, because it's like even if I'm really satisfied with a piece, I'm still always looking for ways that I can improve. So I'll be picking out things like maybe it would have been better if I did this and stuff. So, and I don't want to tear apart my art in my head constantly. So that's
Right.
why I like to just sort of, so if it's physically around me in my room or in my house, then I'm always going to be staring at it like,
That's
what
true.
can I do?
That's true. So turning that around, again, taking from your inspirations, do you ever intend or hope your art will challenge others?
I do. I think I was really drawn to street art and graffiti when I was
Mm-hmm.
younger because um, as much as I loved going to art museums, I always felt like you had to specifically choose to go and see the art in an art museum. Street art, you don't have the option to not look at it.
Right, you come around a
So
corner, there it is.
yeah, and so so I think it's a really interesting way of challenging people. I wrote a paper in university about Shepard Fairey, who everyone knows his work, even if they don't know who he is,
Yep,
because he's a street artist. I believe he does Make Art Not War is probably his most famous piece with
got it.
it has guns and like roses coming out of it.
Yep, yep,
Yes. And so he did a lot of work. I specifically wrote about his work in reframing how people in the United States view Middle Eastern people, especially women. because especially after 9/11, how much like Islamophobia like strengthened and became such a oppressive force of hatred in
Uh-huh.
the United States. So he would use visuals. He would of painting or screen printing, making these street art of Middle Eastern women, and they're like visibly Muslim. They would often be wearing hijabs or other religious like headwear, but having them surrounding them with like roses or guns with roses coming out of them, which is a similar motif he uses a lot. And sort of like if you see that while you're walking around on the street, the thing about imagery is it can say so much in just a single glance.
Hmm.
You know, you don't have to work word through word. So I think it's really effective in then challenging how you view people and how you view the world around you. So that was something that really I thought was interesting as a way of challenging how people think and challenging your own internal biases and beliefs and maybe questioning why you think that or why you would associate certain things with certain people.
Right, right. All right. Can we talk about well, actually, no. I want to stay on that topic for one more second.
Yeah, sure.
You are putting up for pre-order a piece of art that has a challenge in it, and it challenges the traditional relationship structure.
Yeah.
Can we
Sorry.
talk?
Do
Can
you
we
have
talk
more of
about
the
it?
question? Yes, yeah.
Well, so first off, for those of you on YouTube, we'll flash it here. So the question is, can we tell people about the health throuple and what the inspiration was for? Was
Yeah.
about?
Yes. So, I have always loved theater. I love film. I grew up reading a lot of comics and manga, and so I've always been inspired by other stories. I think maybe I might not be the best at creating my own original stories, so I always admire when people can. And um, and so The Lost Boys is the 1987 movie was recently turned into a Broadway musical. And if there's one thing I love possibly more than movies, it's musicals. So, um, but I went to see it and it was like completely exceeded my expectations. I always say sort of the movie was like just skimming the surface of something great. It really leans into atmosphere and like aesthetics and soundtrack more than it does the actual characters and plot.
Yep, it does.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
yes. So then the musical really said, what if we actually developed that narrative? What if we explored the relationships, gave the characters more backstory, and sort of really expanded upon all the potential I feel like it had?
Hmm.
And so it completely, went in knowing I was going to be critical, and I was like, it's everything I wanted it to be, which is so exciting. And I loved how much they developed the sort of love triangle between the three, like, sort of main characters.
Hmm.
In that we usually say love triangle, meaning there's one person and then there's two other people that both want that person, a la Twilight with it, Edward, Jacob, and
Yeah,
Bella. But
everybody wants Bella.
yeah, but much more interesting is when you have a triangle that actually completes itself,
Yes.
and all three people have interesting dynamics with each other. And there's so much about sort of desire and wanting, not even necessarily desire in a romantic or sexual sense, but desire in the way that you want to connect with someone and you want them to be in your life, and then the idea of then also like finding out who you are and what your values are, and does that align with someone else that you want in your life that you feel a draw towards for whatever reason.
Hmm.
And so there's such an interesting dynamic between the three of them, and I'm like, I don't know if I can like, it feels weird to spoil things because it's such an old movie. People probably know,
You're not spoiling
but
anything.
yeah. But so one of the most interesting things is that um, the character David, who is a vampire, he wants to turn the other two into vampires, but they want to stay in the human world, hold on to their humanity. But that's sort of his way of desiring them to join his sort of family, his found family. Is if
Yeah.
you become a vampire, you can join my vampire found family.
Hmm.
And which is also, there's so much queerness in the idea of found family, and also the fact that they're part of like a punk subculture in the
Yes.
80s as well. So very, very queer coded. and very sort of more explicitly queer in the musical. But so then that tension sort of all comes to a head in that the two of them, Michael and Star, the two that want to remain human, eventually have to then kill David,
David,
sorry, have to kill David at the end. And sort of like how so there's so much tension basically between wanting each other, but wanting each other in a specific way that doesn't line up with the other's reality and values,
hmm
um, and like wanting to take someone's life from them metaphorically through vampirism or taking it from them literally by staking a vampire.
right.
And so there's just so much, it's so delicious. There's so much to explore between all of those avenues. So yeah, that's sort of what has drawn me so much to that musical.
Well, and so when I looked at your art, specifically this piece, before I read what it was about, because you did tell me, you did send what the inspiration was, but before I read that, I saw the art, and what I saw was the look in three pairs of eyes of the I could have this. Like you
Yeah.
captured that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's actually one of the like biggest songs in the musical is called I Have to Have You,
Oh,
which
really?
is yeah. So it is that idea of like whether it's I want to own you, I want to consume you, I want to kill you, I want to be in love with you, I want you to be with me forever. It's just there's so much in that like longing and yearning and just wanting someone in any way that you can have them. And but then also the danger of then losing yourself in that and losing what's important to you.
hmm
It's there's a lot.
There's a lot. So, as I said, pre-orders are up. People can go to your store, and that is Nootcreations, and put in their pre-order.
Yeah, I this is my first time doing pre-orders, but I one thing is that, it's always tough to do an investment of ordering a lot of stock of something and then just have to putting up all that money up front and just hoping
Mm,
that enough people want to purchase it that you can sort of break even.
right.
But I know a lot of people do pre-orders so that they can fund it without having to put up all of that money beforehand. And
Well,
there was enough response to that piece that I felt like, oh, this is something I could do a pre-order for.
well, the other benefit to the pre-order is you get an idea of what kind of quantity to order.
Exactly, yes. Because
So,
I've had pieces sell out way faster than I thought they would, and I have stocks of things that I only did that first order because only someone buys it every now and then.
right,
And I mean, I'm excited that someone buys it at all, and I'm happy that I have it when someone wants it. But yeah, you kind of are just guessing. I don't know how many people are going to be interested in owning this.
right. All right, now I'm going to hop topics because
Mhm.
one of the things you had mentioned when you signed up is that you sort of have a mission to make art accessible. And I'm going to ask you to explain that a bit for people who aren't necessarily in the art world.
Yeah. So for one thing, when I was doing my thesis collection in university, that was one thing that I had brought up to my advisors and my professors was that I was like, I've always sort of dreamed of being a part of a thesis showcase and stuff. But again, people have to go out of their way to go see it. And then they can take a picture on their phone if they want. But other than that, then they just leave with it in their memories. And that's really nice and that's really cool. But I've always wanted to have art that's just out there. I was in college during 2016 when there was the shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando.
hmm
And while I haven't been to Pulse physically and, don't really know anyone there, um, it hit very hard, especially as someone who was frequently going to nightclubs. And I actually would go to Florida sometimes because I have family there. And even my sister who's not queer would go to like the queer nightclubs there with her queer friends. Um, so yeah, it was very hard hitting. And so I made sort of a memorial piece that sort of listed the names and ages of all of them, because part of what is so horrible about the tragedy is that, a lot of them were just starting their lives. And
Yes.
so, and no one deserves to have their life taken from them that way, but it just adds another layer of just absolute horror at how young some of them were. So, I put the sort of memorial piece with their names and ages and all that in it's called the Quad, but sort of in the center of my university,
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of people go through because I didn't want them to have to go into an art building and then go see it in the gallery. I wanted them to just have to see it while they go about their everyday life. Because
Right.
I mean, a lot of people aren't going to think about them. And so that's like I said, one thing that is really important to me is that idea of bringing art to people rather than them having to go out of their way to see art. Because, time is a luxury, transportation is a luxury,
Right.
access to certain buildings is a luxury. And so one thing that I did was I made stickers, like sort of sticker versions of all of the pieces in my thesis art collection. And I
Uh-huh.
had them out on a table with my thesis collection just for people to take for free. And I was like, you can put it up somewhere on campus, you can put it on your own items, you can do whatever you want with it. You can throw it out if you want, but here's a way that you can take this art out of this space and bring it to other people.
Love that. So, I'm not going to ask you to throw yourself under the bus in case you ever actually have done street art, but let's pretend you haven't. If you were to, say, pick up a can or two of spray paint and do some street art, what would your tag be?
I have thought about this a lot because I have a couple friends who tag and do street art, and they work so hard on their font and their what
Yes.
they want their tag to be. And so I've always thought, what if I did it? What if I did it? And I feel like I would probably end up doing Noot, like Noot, just because it's sort of like a really fond thing for me. Part
Uh-huh.
of it is that it was a nickname that friends in high school gave me that I'm still friends with to this day. And another thing is that I always really liked Pingu the penguin when I was a kid. And that's sort of like one of his iconic noises. And
Right.
I did consider making my artist sort of tag on and the name of my shop, NSB Creations, from NSB is my initials. But I
Hmm.
sort of like polled people and they were like, Newt kind of has sort of a silliness and a whimsy to it that
Yes.
feels like it fits, and NSB is a little too serious. And I sort of agree with that, that I like keeping it sort of playful and a little fun. So I feel like that's probably what I would end up doing. But we had, I haven't done street art, but I have worked with spray paint and stencils and a little bit, and it is so difficult. I like have so much respect for them. I mean, that's part of the reason why people practice so much when it
Yeah.
comes to street art is because it is such a difficult medium to work with. And especially if you want to be very precise with it, but then you're also working at such a large scale.
Hmm.
So yeah, but I think would probably just do Newt because it's something that sort of just resonates with me and feels like a part of me now.
Neat. All right. So I know you have a book cover design under your belt,
Yes.
and we've talked about how I have seen a whole story in your art, just in the piece you shared with me today. How important, like subconsciously, because you've actually gone into the study of this, and I'm asking this question on behalf of our listeners who look
Mhm.
at book covers but don't understand the design, or look at a piece of art but don't necessarily understand what's going on. How important psychologically are the historic ties, the resonances, everything that goes into the visual of the storytelling of a piece of art?
Um, that's a very, there's just so much to say with that question.
I know,
Um,
I'm so sorry for you.
no, it's okay. I'm just trying to, I can sometimes talk in circles. I can talk for a very long time. So I'm trying to be more concise and specific with how I answer. But I think a lot of times, whether we are aware of it or not, art elicits a reaction and it makes you feel a certain way. And one thing I think of a lot is which I'm like, bear with me here, it's coming back to the book covers, but
Okay.
um, people often see things like those. I'm so bad at artist names and things like that. I have a horrible memory, which is why I cannot be an art historian. But those art pieces where it's just the entire canvas is blue
Hmm.
and that's it. People, especially non-artists, get so mad. And it's sort of like, first of all, kind of an effective piece if it's bringing such a strong reaction out of you.
Uh-huh.
Why would the color blue make you so mad? But also, there's often historical context within that. Um, the specific pigment they use was sort of like non-existent at the time. So it was the first like making using it was expensive and hard to get. So making a massive canvas of just that
Hmm.
is like really something new for
It's a
the
statement.
world of art and supplies and resources. But then also, like a lot of times, it has ties to a specific feeling. And I know one art piece that is almost all one color. First of all, it's usually rarely just that one color, but um, it will tie into like a feeling of like grief and loneliness. And so it's just sort of like a wall where there's like nothing there except for that color. And so I think there can be a lot there that if you take the time to think about it, but
Hmm.
also like I probably wouldn't have known that it was a painting made out of like grief and isolation unless I read the little placard.
Sure.
So something that you learn in illustration specifically is if you make a piece and the person looking at it doesn't understand what you were trying to say with it, then it's sort of ineffective. Like you can say the art is good or bad or whatever, but it's not doing a good job of communicating. Whereas
Mm.
fine art, like those big canvases of just one color, it's less about that. It's just as much about the process and the history as it is about the final product. Whereas illustration is much more, what are you saying, and does the audience understand what you're saying? So I think historical context and things are a lot more important when it comes to fine art that's just in galleries, paintings, things like that that serve other purposes. When it comes to illustration for book covers, you are trying to elicit a reaction, and you want that reaction to be something very specific. You don't really want it up to interpretation that much.
Hmm.
Like you want people to be able to theorize or wonder or ponder and think on it, but you don't want them to actually sort of be floundering and have no idea, you know?
Mm.
So even book covers that don't depict specific scenes, even if it's a specific color, a certain font, certain colors, shapes, like whether it's something sharp, organic, whether it's something fluid, the contrast between the different colors, all of those make you feel something specific. And will communicate then a certain reaction within you. So even if it's not like depicting a subject or a scene, even if it's just a flat color, or then also whether it's a flat color or it's abstract and has multiple shapes and values within it, all of
Mm.
those are supposed to make you feel something specific. So I think a lot of times, if you're unsure, like if you're picking up a book and there's no characters on the front, there's no scene, um, if you just sort of like look at it, just think, what does this make me feel? And try and think about things that are similar visually. So if it's dark, it's like if it's a lot of dark colors, you're like, okay, what do dark colors tell me? It tells me moody, maybe more serious, maybe more heavy. And then like light, if it's really, really bright and colorful, it's like there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of vibrance, a lot of life, so you can sort of just try and compare it to other things that you know
Hmm.
and that have similar features, like whether it's the colors or the darkness or brightness, the way the shapes are. Is it all blurry or is it really stark in contrast? Those are things that all make you feel something. So you can just sort of, maybe it's easier said than done, but to me, it's just like you can sort of sit with it and think, even just sort of base level, like, does this yellow make me feel happy, or is it a little bit of more of a sickly yellow? Or
Right.
like, does this blue make me feel sad, or does it make me feel calm? Like, there's still a lot of interpretations if you just get down to literally being like, what color is this? Is it darker? Is it bright?
Hmm.
And that can really inform a lot.
So, from a technical aspect, as the artist, is that the type of work you like to do? Because it sounds really involved. Or would you rather
Yeah.
come up with the story like you were inspired by this musical? Would you rather just come up with the story in your head and do your art?
Well, that's part of why I'm so inspired by things like the musical, books, movies, because someone else came up with the story. I oftentimes I do make some original art. I have some original characters that I've made, but they don't have a specific like narrative. I have ideas, I have snippets, but actually creating it into a cohesive world and universe and storyline and timeline, that stuff is all very hard for me to sort out. Maybe it's just sort of the scatterbrained ADHD and the indecisiveness, but so that's partly why I'm so inspired by other people's stories, is because I like storytelling so much, but I struggle to create the whole thing myself.
Hmm.
So I do really like, I am interested in doing book covers. What's tough is that with fibromyalgia comes brain fog, famously known as fibro fog, and that combined with ADHD has made reading a little bit harder for me than it used to be. I used to be such a bookworm. And
Hmm.
um, so I do sometimes feel like I would want to do the book justice, but I would really want to be able to read through the whole thing and have a perspective. And something you learn in illustration is as much about the author's vision as it is yours. So I can come up with the ideas, but what if the author says, I want to communicate something more serious than what, even if the book is lighthearted overall.
Hmm.
So it is as much a collaborative thing between author and artist, in my opinion. I mean, some people are kind of like, they give the artist full control and just sort of say, I just don't want it to have this color or something, or I don't want it to have any faces or something like it. And then some people say, I want all these really specific things. And so it really depends on the person. But for me personally, as an artist, I really like it to be collaborative, um, and I prefer to do other people's stories than my own for that reason.
Totally fair. All right, we've covered a lot of ground today. I'm going to ask one final question.
Mhm.
Is there anything about your art, your process, or your history that you want folks to know that I didn't think to ask?
That's a very good question. Um, I think, hmm, I mean, one thing that I think is not as like visually seen as much because I have to do more digital art now is that um I used to do a lot of like mixed media. So I would, even in my paintings, I would add collage and acrylic pour, and it would be like ink and painting, and sometimes I would include my photography or writing or things like that. And so I think I do always sort of try to bring elements of that into my digital art, but I also think that made me grow a lot as an artist by not limiting myself to just one medium, being like, I'm going to do an acrylic painting and it's going to be an acrylic painting, like
Hmm.
it can be anything you want it to be. And so it can be, it doesn't even have to be a stretch canvas, doesn't have to be a primed canvas. I used to do, I would do like sketches with marker on computer paper, um, and I had a professor say, why can't this be part of your finished product? Like, because I was saying I have such a disconnect between my sketches and my final product, and it was stressing me out so much. And they say, why can't the sketch be the final product? And why can't you work directly with the sketch? I would say it's on a piece of scrap paper. And they said, why can't it be on a piece of scrap paper? So I think a lot of my art came from uh, freeing yourself from expectations and really playing in the space, experimenting as much as you want. If you feel like this needs to have something in it, it doesn't matter. Like I said, sometimes I would use glitter. People would say, why is there glitter there? And I would say, it felt right. And sometimes I learned that glitter was not appropriate for the piece for what I wanted to convey. So, like, even if there's something that you want to use, sometimes it's not the right thing to effectively communicate what you want to communicate. But so like, I don't know. I guess a lot of my process really comes from being experimental and trying to push myself and trying to do things that maybe you might not traditionally think of when you think of making art. And I think that was what made me find my style and what I like to do so much
Hmm.
as an artist. And that's also what makes art unique, is that I knew one of my friends in college, he got into art school with a portfolio that was only done in like Sharpie and ballpoint pen. And because it's not about the materials, it's not, that doesn't determine the integrity of what you do. And I think a lot of people that go to art school or try to be artists, it's I have to use the best paint, I have to use the best materials, and like, yeah, you can get really good work with really good materials, but it's just as much about what you can do with what you have than
Right.
just having the best things.
Right. Very nice. I love that. All right. Before I move on to my get to know you questions, not like I
Yes.
haven't been asking get to know you questions this whole time,
Yeah.
I need to take a quick second to plug our channel, fans and friends. If you like what we're doing, if you like learning about new queer media, everything from art to song, we've had television writers, we've had film writers, and of course, authors. Please take a moment to come and support our channel. You can do it on YouTube for 99 cents a month. You could hit us at Patreon, sign up for either subscription or buy some one off episodes. And also, my co host Baz and Albert Nothlet take turns showing Albert some new queer media that he's never seen because he grew up in Mexico and didn't always have access to American culture. So if you like reaction videos, go check those out too. And finally, if you just want to do a one time donation, we are at buymeacoffee.com/rope podcast. Everything helps because we have an 11-year archive of queer voices that we want to keep building as long as we can. So, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you.
Yes.
Now, Natalie,
Yes.
my get to know you questions. What book, and I'm counting on you to have a good answer for this because you are a media fan.
Mm.
What book, film, or piece of art has had the biggest influence on your art style?
This was a really, really tough one. And I always sort of, my usual answer for what inspired me to be an artist is Tony DeTerlizzi, who illustrated the Spiderwick Chronicles.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that made me go, I want to be an illustrator. I want to do what he does. And I
Neat.
think he does a lot of, he's someone who his like sketch work and line work is very visible in a lot of his finished products. So in some ways I think that, but it's interesting because our styles don't look anything alike. And in thinking, when I was trying to think of like what maybe drives, what's a more visible reference in my art style that maybe I haven't thought about, I remembered Lisa Frank. I loved Lisa Frank
Yes.
stickers and stuff and coloring books by Lisa Frank as a kid. And even like recently, I was at an event where there were a bunch of free stickers and they had Lisa Frank stickers. And I was like, oh my God,
Still?
I love Lisa Frank. Yeah,
Awesome.
I was like, this is so cute. Yay. And I do remember someone once said about an art piece I had that they were like, it reminds me a lot of like Lisa Frank with the
Neat.
colors and the lines and the glitter and the contrast and saturation. I was like, that makes so much sense because I loved Lisa Frank as a kid. So I think that was a more sort of like subconscious influence on my art style. And knowing that, like I said, once you sort of let go of a lot of preconceived notions you have,
Mm-hmm.
I can make something as rainbow as I want it to be.
Yep. Yep. All right. I'm going to add a word to my next question, but historical, what fictional or historical character or real artist would you invite to march with you at a pride parade?
Um, so I did think I was like, it would be cool to go with Frida Kahlo. We could maybe both have like wheelchairs or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I did also think, thinking fictional character wise, I love Interview with the Vampire. I love the AMC, what AMC has done with the story.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't read the original books, but I saw the original movie and didn't really think, I thought that was kind of cool. And then just sort of moved on with my life. But AMC has really breathed new life into it.
Yes.
And I love what they did with the character Claudia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was, and also I know the whole point is that Claudia has to have a tragic end, like especially because the original writing of the character was the author dealing with her own grief over her own daughter. So I know it's sort of like she's always going to be doomed,
Mm-hmm.
but I would love to be able to give her something like
Aw.
like her or her and her girlfriend Madeline, like to have a pride parade where they could see, especially because Claudia is so lonely. She wants to find other people like her
Mm-hmm.
and not just other vampires, but she wanted other women. She's always around men. So I would love to be able to go to a pride parade with Claudia and show her other queer women who are like her and give her like a positive experience.
Can I keep her? Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I know you don't write specific stories for your
Mhm.
characters, but if a character from your art had to survive a gay bar karaoke night, what song would they belt out? And it's okay for you to pass on a question that just makes no sense.
That's okay. I did think about this and I wasn't really sure. Um, but I thought it was like, what about me if I had, because I do karaoke all the time,
Oh, nice.
but I was like, is there a specific sort of like, if it was a queer, if it had to be like queer focused karaoke, what would I do? And one of my favorite songs by one of my favorite queer artists is Honey by Halsey.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, I relate to Halsey a lot with her history of mental illness, and she's also non-binary and bisexual. Also has health issues and stuff, and all, but that's a whole other can of worms. But so that's one of my favorite songs, and it is an explicitly queer song. And I have an art piece based on that song. So I love to sing that song in the car. So I was like, if I
Nice.
had to sing a song, I have also sung Electric Lady by Janelle Monáe at a gay bar karaoke because Janelle Monáe is another massive inspiration for me. Again,
See, you've already
gen
lived this question.
yeah, another genderqueer bisexual who makes amazing music. But I surprisingly have not yet sung Honey by Halsey at a gay bar karaoke.
Oh,
So I sort of altered the question to be what would I do? And I realized I would do that song because it's really important to me.
love it. All right. What's a place, and it can be real or imagined, that feels like home to you and why?
This was another really tough question because I think a lot of things I'm navigating right now in my life are the fact that I don't have many places that I feel at home.
Mm,
But I first thing I thought of was uh, cuddling any warm, soft animal because
mm,
we grew up with like really big dogs
mm,
and they were very much a part of the family. So I would get on the floor with them or they'd get on the bed with them. And I could like, as a kid, I could wrap my arms around them because they were so big
yep.
and just like sleep with them. And now I have two cats who are very, very cuddly. They will sleep like on your face. And demand to be held and stuff like that. And just like being with a warm, soft animal is
Mm,
a really, really like healing, feels like home to me, feels very comforting. And the other place I would say is any comfortable bed. As someone with
nice.
with chronic pain and chronic fatigue, one of the safest places I can be is like with a weighted blanket on a comfortable bed and know that I don't have to get up. It takes so much of the pain away, lets me rest, makes me feel better emotionally, safe. Like, if I'm having a bad day, I want to get in bed because that's like a safe place to be.
I get that. All right. Well, what is the strangest or most unexpected place you've ever found inspiration for your work?
Um, this is tough because I feel like all of them no one really surprised me or was unexpected, but I think horror movies maybe.
Okay.
I didn't learn to enjoy horror movies until I was sort of like towards the end of high school. I kept seeing the horror movies that were big when I was a kid were things like Paranormal Activity
Mm,
and like House of Wax and like Saw and all these ones that I actually do love the Saw movies now, but but they were all these that are just they don't have many like sort of psychological aspects to them. They're very supernatural,
oh,
and I wasn't very in paranormal things don't really scare me at all. And a lot of the paranormal ones don't have much of a story behind them, so they always left me wanting more. And I'm also not religious, so things with like demonic possession, I didn't really hit for me, but. Um, one of my favorite movies that I actually have them tattooed on my arms is Jennifer's Body.
mm,
And that was sort of one of the first, I mean, it's a horror comedy, but it's
yeah.
one of the first horror movies that I saw that had so much story and like the characters were so specific, had such a specific tone. And I like love it as a movie, even outside of the horror elements. And I realized that I was like, I just have to find the right horror movies that I really like. So then I sort of started this journey of trying to find the good horror movies for me.
Mm,
Um, and so I think maybe I didn't really ever expect to be inspired by horror movies because I so much of my life I didn't even like them. But now it's like my favorite genre. And and yeah, I get so inspired by characters in horror movies and what they go through and things like that.
Nice. Which themes or motifs do you find yourself returning to again and again in your work?
I realized so queerness very much so. Um, and but then I was thinking deeper. I was like beyond sort of the themes that I list in my artistic bio, like, mental health and the relationship with the body, sense of self, queerness. What else is am I constantly going back to? And I realized I am so drawn to vampires. I have
I've
so many,
noticed.
yeah, I have so many artworks of vampires. A lot of the original characters I create are vampires, and there's really something, I think there's something to explore in being a creature that can pass as human under certain circumstances that
Hmm.
also is very much like a queerness type of thing. Because I say queerness is one of the only marginalized identities that isn't always visible,
Right.
but sometimes it is. It sort of depends on the context, depends on the person.
Hmm.
So I think vampires are very much tied to queerness when it comes to creatures and horror creatures. And so I think that's part of what draws me so much to vampires.
Yep.
And also there's the idea of I mean, I've always kind of liked like one thing that did draw me to horror was I've always kind of liked like blood and darkness and creatures and stuff like that. I
Hmm.
loved the fantasy genre because I loved the monsters and stuff as much as
Nice.
I loved unicorns, but I also loved dragons and I also loved like trolls and stuff. So I think it also there's with vampires, there's the duality of the scary creature and then sort of the allure of something strange and different.
Yep. Yeah, there's
And
the scary
so
creature and there's the sensuality. And
yeah,
that hybrid is powerful.
yes, and very queer. And
Yes.
so I think that's part of the reason that I get so drawn to vampires. And also, you think about immortality and you think about time and you
Hmm.
think about how our environment affects us, the people we know and the people we've lost have affected us, and how that would exist and affect people over such a long period of time of like centuries.
Right.
Yeah, so I always come back to vampires. They're just endlessly fascinating to me.
Neat. All right, final question. What is a piece of LGBTQ plus culture? It can be music, film, art, or history that never fails to inspire you.
Um, this was very hard, but I think one thing is Rocky Horror. I
Yes.
think Rocky Horror I didn't see until my freshman year of college, but it sort of like flipped my life around. And for my birthday every year, we would go to a live screening where they do all the fun interactive scripts and the props, and you get to dance on the stage and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to be involved in a shadow cast productions of that, and I think but I also think the story itself, like sort of the phenomenon that Rocky Horror has become aside, um, there's like there's everything about it is sort of off kilter. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's darkness, but certain things that are scary aren't treated as scary, but then certain things that are scary are. And there's also like a life and a brightness to it.
Yep.
I think just Columbia's costume alone is like so up my alley. And but then my favorite character is actually Magenta because I love the idea of like a maid that does not do anything
Mm-hmm.
about regarding being a maid.
Yep.
And um and the I don't know, there's so much there. And then there's like queerness that's can be argued to be sort of like negative queerness, but then also the freeing
Yeah.
aspect
Oh,
of queerness. There's like,
I mean, the Brad
yeah,
and Janet characters, their whole storyline is about unlocking themselves and being free.
yeah,
Like that's their
yeah.
whole
And
storyline.
yeah, and I love sort of the way everything sort of I love the chaos of it.
Mm-hmm.
I love how it all sort of unravels. And yeah, at the end they're all kind of like falling apart and the Transylvanians are trying to take them away and Frankenfurter's dying and Rocky's like and they're all having sort of all making out in a pool, but they're all in drag and they're all like happy even though everything's falling apart.
Uh-huh.
So like yeah, there's so much there with just with visually, tonally. character-wise, relationship-wise, like, and so I think there's Rocky Horror is something that there's always something there that just makes me want to create more art. I can see it a million times over, and it's just like this is something that I would love to create. And it's another example of something that's so camp, but also is so has like moments of like honesty and like
Yeah.
really poignant things
Yep.
that maybe weren't even entirely intentional, but it still comes out. So I think Rocky Horror is something that will just endlessly inspire me, even if I haven't technically made much Rocky Horror art. But I think part of the reason for that is because I'm like, what else can I add to this? It's like already everything I want it to be. And so, I mean, I'll probably end up making Rocky Horror art at some point because it's just so important to me.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, everything about Rocky Horror is just so stimulating artistically.
I would challenge you to create your own magenta character. Not magenta. I
Yeah.
want to see your Columbia character actually, because you do colors so
Ooh,
well.
thank you. Yeah, I have, whenever we would go to the screenings, I would dress up as Magenta, but I have always wanted Columbia's outfit. And I love her character too. She's probably my second favorite. But yeah, I would love to make something Columbia-esque.
Cool. You made it through my list. You made it through my interview. Which social media should folks follow you on if they want to keep up with your updates and see what's coming?
I think so. Instagram is where I post probably the most often,
Okay.
and I'm the most active on. But given Instagram's sort of horrible policies for artists and horrible algorithm as well, I am trying to lean more into my Tumblr and using my Tumblr more.
Okay.
Um, so, and I'm trying to get better at sort of casual posting as well, because I'm not the most consistent with creation due to my physical health. So, I'm trying to get better at sort of just posting even when I'm not creating and just posting ideas I have and what's going on in my life. So I would say probably Instagram, and then if you hate Instagram, then Tumblr would be the next best thing.
All right. So Instagram is Nootcreations. That one I know.
Yes.
Is Tumblr also at Nootcreations?
Yes, everything
Perfect.
is Nootcreations. It's just that for Tumblr, it's usually nootcreations.tumblr.com.
Right.
And then just like my shop is nootcreations.bigcartel.com.
Perfect. And that was the next thing I was going to ask. You just dropped it.
Yes.
Where people can go to buy your art. All right. Natalie, any final words of wisdom you want to share with people?
Um, I think just to keep your imagination open and to not limit yourself, and that even if you think you can't do things, if you think you can't do things perfectly or the way you want them to, you have to do them anyway.
Beautiful. All right, folks, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Natalie Simone for joining me here today. Natalie, thank you. And thank you for keeping your art out in the world. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for posting it on the street when people aren't looking.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for continuing to uh, uplift the voices of other queer creators to make sure that everyone gets heard and to build, continue to build community across the world.
It is my pleasure, honor, and mission in life. All right, folks, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Our show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our links, our disclaimers, and social stuff, please go to www.roguepodcast.com. Tune in next week for our queer media fix.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.